going to start with putting a pound of butter into a sauce pot, and you want to melt it down, and we're going to basically lightly toast this. Right when you see the little specks of the butter start to toast, you want to turn it off. The residual heat's going to carry it all the way through. If you see it get brown, then it's gone too far. After this, you cool it, and then you end up with something that looks like this. This is going to be our base for our brown butter cream cheese frosting later on. Next up, our pumpkin ganache. We're going to get our pumpkin puree, brown sugar, and we're going to put that in the saucepan, and then to that we're going to add a part of the heavy cream and a mixture of the spices. This will all be in the description below. And we want to cook it just to kind of, mellow out the spices and cook the pumpkin puree a little bit and heat up the cream. And it's going to turn into something that looks like this, steamy. Here we have the heated cream. We're going to pour it over our white chocolate chips. And then to that we are going to add our cooked pumpkin puree mixture. You want to mix this together, and then you want to hit it with the immersion blender just to make sure that it's totally smooth and creamy. Then we're going to chill this as well, and you're going to end up with a really smooth, creamy pumpkin ganache that we're going to fill our cream puffs with. We start off with our flour and baking soda and baking powder, our pumpkin puree, our spices, and our eggs and vanilla. We also have our oil in here. We're going to measure our milk right into this. It's 1.5 cups of milk. And in here we have our 2 sugars, brown sugar and white sugar, and our molasses and salt. This is the pumpkin puree mixture with the eggs and the vanilla. And then we're going to sift our dry ingredients. You're going to sift the flour and the spices together. Now we are ready to mix. But before we add the dry, sometimes if you notice any really big brown sugar lumps, you can buzz it with the immersion blender right before you start the dry and wet ingredients, just to make sure that it's smooth pumpkin puree and all the sugar is mixed thoroughly inside. So that's what I did here, and this is what it looks like after buzzing it with the immersion blender. This is kind of optional though. If you don't mind the sugar clumps, then you can go right on ahead to this part. Snap it back in. And now we're going to alternate between dry and the oil and milk mixture. You want to start with dry, and then you want to end with dry. You want to do this ideally on a number 2, or even stir is probably best. If you have a KitchenAid, if you're doing it by hand, you can also whisk this. Just give this a little stir. This is what the final batter looks like, and now we're ready to scoop and bake. So we want to line our cupcake tins, and I am using what we call here the yellow scoop. I will put the description below what the size I'm using is. But you want to basically either use the side of the bowl to level it off, or you can also use an offset spatula just to make sure that it's level, so that the portions are all the same and the cupcakes come out evenly. Throw these babies in the oven, 350 degrees, and you end up with these. We're going to cool them on the rack and move on to the next part. We're going to start off with the craquelin part, because while that's getting cool in the freezer, then we can move on to the choux. So we start off with the butter and the salt in a mixing bowl. To that we're going to add our sugar, and then we're going to mix that, and then we are going to add our flour last. We mix it up. You can add all the flour in at once, just kind of like cookie dough mixing method. And you just want to mix it till it's all mixed well and uniformly. And you're going to be left with like a cookie dough type dough that we're going to roll out between parchment paper into thin sheets. You get 2 pieces of parchment paper, and we're going to divide up our dough. Your recipe might just need 1 set of parchment paper if it's a smaller batch. So we are going to separate them about equally. You can just eyeball this. And we are going to shape it into sort of a rectangle shape, just to give us a better chance of getting it evenly throughout the whole parchment paper. And now we're ready to roll. Pun intended. Okay, so with the rolling pin, I'm going to roll it using like traditional rolling method. As it gets thinner though, I'm going to do kind of like mimic of a sheeter, in which case I kind of pass the rolling pin back and forth with even pressure to get it as close to the edge as possible, so that I have an even thin layer of the cookie dough. I want to say 1/4 of an inch, but that never really like makes sense to me visually, so I'll just show you what it should look like. It should be about, there you go, it should be about this thick. I will write that in the description below as well. From here, we're going to label this and place it in the freezer to chill while we make our pâte de choux dough. We're going to start with the water and the butter. We're going to let that melt before we add our flour and salt mixture. Then we're going to cook it on medium-low heat. And you know it's ready when it starts sticking to the bottom of the pot, like it's doing here. Then we're going to throw it in our mixing bowl and let it cool while we crack our eggs to add. This recipe calls for about 4 to 5 eggs. I typically do the 4 eggs, and then I just have, I don't crack the 5th egg just in case I actually don't need it. You kind of want to just check in with the dough and see if you're going to need that additional egg. I just kind of put it off to the side like this, and then just wait to see. This dough actually did need it, so I ended up cracking it and adding it to the dough. Sometimes you can add the whole egg, or sometimes you could even add just half the egg, just depending on what your assessment is. You want to make sure that the dough is pipeable but still pretty thick, like this. That's just about perfect. This will make sure that the paper parchment doesn't fly up when you're baking these. You want to pipe them staggering, so you want to start swish. Won't really matter too much.
About the top because we're going to put the craquelin. We're going to put the craquelin on top, so plus I'm totally trying to record this with one hand and pipe with the other. I won't reveal my behind the scenes movie making magic secrets. In between, in between.
Now we're going to cut the circles out to place on the pâte de choux. So this layer of the craquelin is what's going to really give this an extra layer of crunch and flavor on top of the cream puff. It's going to really take this to the next level. And then when we fill it with the pumpkin ganache, it's going to be super tasty. So we can just keep putting on the little circles of the craquelin on top of the choux. What's going to happen basically is the choux is going to expand and get bigger, and this little thin layer of the craquelin is going to bake around it and create a crispier shell on the outside. It's going to be crack-a-lackin'. Crackalicious? Maybe crackalicious. So I'm gonna keep putting on these, and then I'm gonna fire up the oven to throw them in and bake them. I will meet you guys back here. You're gonna get something that looks like this. Aren't they cute? So after they bake, you want to cool them, and then you want to make a little hole on the bottom of each craquelin. So we're going to get the brown butter that we made earlier, the cream cheese, and we are going to sift the powdered sugar right into it. You want to put the paddle attachment on, and we're going to start beating it a little bit on slow speed, and then we're going to increase the speed and whip it till it becomes light and fluffy, and it looks like this. So tasty. You see the little specks of the brown butter in there. It's like cream cheese frosting, but just better. Now we have all our ingredients and ready to assemble this cupcake. We put the pumpkin ganache in a piping bag, and we're going to start by filling the cream puffs. And now for the best part, which is, of course, to taste. Pumpkilicious. The moist pumpkin spice cake with the toasted brown butter flavor that's in the brown butter cream cheese frosting. Little hint of the cinnamon on top. Salted caramel really gives it that extra notch of deliciousness. And then of course you have the crispy choux filled with the pumpkin ganache. I'm telling you, you gotta make these. And honestly, if you just wanted to make the cupcakes by themselves, you totally could. Or if you just wanted to make the cream puffs by themselves, you could. You could make larger cream puffs, fill them up the same way, and that could be a dessert in itself. Hell, if you wanted to just make the pumpkin ganache and drizzle it over some ice cream, that would be awesome too. If you like this recipe and you like this kind of content, then please like our video and consider subscribing to our channel. Every week we're going to post recipes, behind the scenes of our bakery life, tips and tricks, and tutorials as well. So until next time, I'll see you guys later. Probably going to save these for friends. Yes, I'm not gonna eat all these by myself. Crazy talk.
Hopeful, yes I am hopeful for today. Take this music and use it, let it take you away, and be hopeful, and he'll make a way.